Incident response of the incident commander. No one will assume who's in charge and would prefer to know who is the person in charge to report to. By announcing your command, both at the scene and to dispatch, this removes any question as to who is in charge of the incident scene. They also know, dispatch that is, will know who to direct any external communications to also. A problem assessment can also be done and should be done. The two that I pinpointed out for this incident was, what is the nature of the incident? This incident was a vehicle crash that involved two vehicles, one which was overturned and one which was pinned. The pinned vehicle was under a chemical tanker, which was also involved in the accident. Now, since we have a chemical tanker, we want to know what type of chemical is involved. You can check the labels to determine what type of chemical it is. If you can't see the labels, you could also try giving the company a quick call saying, okay, we've got one turned over. We need to know what we've got in the tanker. That can take a little while also. So it's not always easy to quickly determine what type of chemical you are dealing with, but you want to act quickly and you want to act safely. One thing I've learned throughout this process was I never knew why the trailers were different shapes. So that's another way you can pinpoint the chemical that's involved. If it's an oval shape, it's normally of low pressure, but it's flammable and liquid. Now, it's not always going to be flammable, however, because it can also carry milk or other liquids. Flammable ones it can contain are some gases or other fuels. A round-shaped tanker is normally of low pressure, carries flammable, poisonous, acid, or caustic liquids. Now, there's three different types that can be here. If you have a high-pressure tanker, it's rounded on both ends. If you've got a corrosive liquid being carried in it, it's reinforced with rings around it. And if there's cryogenic liquid, it normally has refrigeration or is cooled by some nitrogen, which the tank for that is normally right under the wheels. So now if the other tankers are non-tubed, you can see like semis pulling, grain carts, stuff like that. These are normally non-corrosive. So some examples would be some fertilizer, cement, grain, and other smaller items like that are not a flammable material. When establishing communications, you want to keep the radio on the same frequency that was initially used when the incident was reported. You also want to keep phone lines open and readily available for those to get in contact with each other. Within the book, they state to make sure you have the landline's cellular or radio capacity to work also with remote groups. The hot zone is recommended to be 330 feet for small release and 660 feet out for a large release of an unknown spill or leak of a chemical. This comes from the Emergency Response Guidebook. Now, within this scenario, the tanker truck and the chemical leaking from it would be the hot zone of the incident, because this is where massive explosions, the worst possible outcome, somebody's getting hurt, it's going to happen in this area. Now, this liquid is draining or flowing down to this overturned vehicle. Within this line, we want to block off this liquid from going any further to this engine of the overturned vehicle to prevent any further damage and any further extension out of all the zones. Now, the hot zone, hazmat thinks of it as also the contaminated zone. The one big thing is you want to know what direction the chemical is flowing, because that's going to help with the whole rest of the 7 critical tasks of your inner perimeter, your outer perimeter, command and staging posts, and all that you need to be protecting and preventing anything from happening to anybody else. The inner perimeter defines the boundary within which responders work to contain and resolve the incident. They want to contain this chemical leaking towards the overturned vehicle with the engine by the ground. This chemical is draining right to this engine, which can cause an explosion and fire and deaths, and nobody wants that. So they need to contain that so it doesn't get any further. The inner perimeter needs to be a cover for those working behind it to the outer perimeter. Now, the inner perimeter controls the incident itself. Next is the outer perimeter. Now, with the inner perimeter controlling the incident, the outer perimeter controls the response to the incident. The outer perimeter is what keeps the media, the bystanders, the other motorists out of the way and keeps everybody else safe so they know, hey, there's something going on. We need to stay back to prevent anything from happening. You want that safe work area for your responders too. So this is going to be the path in which they are at in a safe environment, knowing that they're not going to get hurt. Next, you want to establish the command post. Now, according to the Transportation Emergency Preparedness Program, the command post, staging area, rehab area are to be located upwind from the exclusion area. So when we are looking at this scenario, we notice that there's a slant, obviously, because the chemical is draining at a downward grade, a downward slope. So we want our staging and command post, which we'll put those together. This isn't a huge incident, so we can have a command and staging post together. Now, where this sheriff parked, he should not be there. And you want to make sure that where you are initially parking to be where your command post is going to be, because moving is going to take more time. So you want to know kind of what's going on by looking, and initially where you're parking is crucial to where this command center is going to be. So with the scenario, I had placed the command and staging post, which you can later see on another slide. I had scanned it in so you could see it. I put it at the top right above the chemical tanker, away from the slope. So we're out of the big area for where it could come into contact with the command post. Now the command post also needs to be stationed in between the inner and both the outer perimeters. Now, as I said earlier, we are placing the staging area with the command post, and I could be wrong, but I think I'm pretty confident on that. But a staging area is required. Now, if the incident's smaller, like I was saying, the staging area can be combined with the command post. Larger, you will need a separate area for the staging. When calling for EMS and fire rescue, they need to be notified to go to the command and staging post, or they could go right into the hot zone, putting more people in danger. Some additional resources that I feel would be needed would, you've got a big mess going on here. There's going to need to be some heavy duty flatbeds, especially one that can pull the chemical tanker and the truck cab out. Fire service in case of any fires that are flared up from any of this. Some tow trucks, and a massive cleanup crew. You've got a lot of chemical that has drained out of this big chemical tanker. And you've got other chemicals that are probably spilling out of the two vehicles that are also upside down, and the truck itself, depending on if there's any damage to that. So you need to be aware that there is lots to clean up here. But to make sure the area is cleaned up so that there's no further contamination once the incident's completely taken care of. Here is the diagram that I was talking about earlier. So you've got your downward slope. You can see the hot zone line. You can see the inner perimeter. Now, unfortunately, my scanner did cut off where I put outer perimeter right there on the bottom. The patrol vehicle where the sheriff's at shouldn't have been there, so that should be out of the picture there. And you want your command post in that top right corner, along with your staging post. NIMS can be very beneficial in this. Now, NIMS is the National Incident Management System. And according to the Emergency Traffic Controls and Scene Management Guidelines, the National Incident Management System, is a comprehensive national approach to incident management that is applicable at all jurisdictional levels and across functional disciplines. These people within the NIMS system are trained and prepared to handle situations without freezing up just like the sheriff did. He couldn't gain his composure. He ended up getting sick, disoriented. I feel they were short a person because they should have been able to count on the sheriff. The sheriff could have called in for EMS and fire, while the other three could have been saving those that are alive real quick, but they needed to go to a different direction away from where the explosion could occur. They wanted to get to safety, so they needed to do that a little bit more carefully than what the sheriff had told them to do. So they should have had the sheriff for that. Within there, you definitely don't want to pull anybody off the shifter like the truck driver was. That's where, I mean, he was fine where he was at for the time being. He's not really in the way of the chemical itself. The big thing was to, I feel the direction I would have went would have been saving those that were pinned underneath, getting them to safety, getting those, checking to see if there was anybody alive in the vehicle that was overturned, as long as the chemical had been contained from getting any further to that vehicle. You want to save those that are alive first, is what I've kind of gathered out of all this. But definitely let EMS handle the truck driver, because if you don't have the required skill set to handle that situation, you need to let somebody that does handle it. They also are able to issue orders effectively, unlike the sheriff was able to, because of getting sick and disoriented, and understand how to properly rescue the people that are involved. Communication and information management are also a big thing for them. They have the concepts and principles, their characteristics, their operations management. They know other resources that are out there to help right away and not having to decipher who can do what. They have their command and management system set up with the incident command system, multi-agency, the area command, and public information. And they're also good at ongoing management and maintenance too, so they can help with cleanup and everything else. They've been trained to do this, so they understand the processes, procedures, and systems that exist in the agencies and the jurisdictional levels.